In this video, we'll talk about programming the general-purpose I/O ports on PIC32 devices. For this one, we'll focus on using the ports for I/O. In a later video, we'll talk about attaching interrupts to changes on those ports. The GPIO ports provide simple input-output capabilities. They work one pin at a time and can be either analog or digital. You can attach an interrupt to a change in the state on a pin, but we'll talk about that in a later video. So in this video, we'll talk about how you poll input ports and set the value of output ports. A port is actually a set of pins that are addressed as a group. How many ports you have and how many pins are in each port depend on the particular PIC32 chip you're using. This diagram shows the architecture of a PIC32 processor. If you're interested in more details about this picture, click on the link at the top of the screen for a video focused on just the architecture. For this video, we're talking about these GPIO ports and how the code running on that core controls them. There are a set of registers that we can read from or write to in order to interact with the ports. There is one for each port, and the ports are labeled A, B, C, etc. The name of the register ends with the name of the port that it's attached to. There are three types of registers that we use to set up GPIO ports. The first of these is the TRIS register, which is used to set whether each pin on the port is to be used for input or output. Even though we're just setting two possibilities, input or output, TRIS is short for tri-state because these ports are tri-state ports. Each pin can either be output high, output low, or input. The ODC register is used to put an output pin into open drain configuration. That means that the output port can drive more power than our usual digital voltage. Finally, the ANSL registers are used to set each pin to operate in either analog or digital mode. If you do nothing, all pins will default to being analog. If you put a pin into digital mode, it does not do analog to digital conversion on the input voltage. They are Schmitt triggers, which means that they change state when the input change is significant, but they won't bounce between states if the input fluctuates by small amounts. Once you have the port configured, there are two registers that we can use to read or write to it. The LAT register is the port data latch register. It remembers the data that we have written to the port. Whatever we write to that latch goes to the corresponding pins for pins that are configured to be output pins. If you read from this register, it will give you the last thing you wrote, not what is on the pin. So this is for writing to the port. The port register reads the state of the port's pins. If you write to the port register, you actually write to the LAT register, so it'll update the output pins. But usually we use port for reading. Some ports do not support all of the bits in those registers because some of the pins are used for other things. You can find which pins are available for your processor from its datasheet. For example, this table in the datasheet for the processor that I'm playing with shows TRIS A, port A, LAT A, and so on. In each row, it's showing which bits of the register are associated with various lines on the port. So on this device, lines 8, 11, 12, and 13 for port A are not available. The datasheet for your processor will also tell you which pin on the chip is wired to each port pin. For example, pin 6 is labeled as RPC1 RC1. That means that it's pin 1 of port C. You'll notice that a lot of these pins also have other labels. For example, look at pin 22. It's pin 3 of port B, but it's also PGED3, which is part of the in-circuit emulator debugger communications channel, AN3, which is a pin on the analog input channels, and C2INA, which is an input to the comparator number 2. This shows the great flexibility that the PIC32 processor family has. Many of the pins are remappable to connect the outside world to different input processors on the chip. I'll make another video about exactly how you do that. In general, if you don't remap them, the ports stay as general purpose I/O ports, so we don't have to do any remapping for this video.
Too much hardware. I'm dying here. Let's write some code.
Yes, Sumi, I agree. The easiest way to write code for a PIC is to use the MPLAB X IDE. It's aware of many PIC features, and it includes tools that help with writing the code. You'll also need an appropriate cross-compiler.
Now there's a word you never defined. A cross-compiler is a compiler that runs on one machine, your development machine, but generates code for a different machine, your embedded system.
Oops, thanks. Microchip has cross-compilers for all of their chips. You just need to use the one for PIC32 processors. When you create a new project, the MPLAB X IDE will ask you to specify the exact processor that your system uses. That will set up your project so that the xc.h file matches your processor. That gives you definitions for the port level registers that we've talked about. You can just set or read them with assignment statements.
Cool. Seems like we're done here.
Not so fast, Zumi. There are some details we need to pay attention to. So look at this example. The caret equals means exclusive OR tris A with hex 20 and then store it back in tris A. We call the hex 20 a mask because it specifies which bits are being affected. To see that, think about exclusive OR. If you XOR anything with 0, you'll get back the original value. So the bits that have zeros in our mask will not affect the values of tris A. If you XOR anything with 1, you get the opposite of the original value. So this statement is flipping the state of one bit on tris A. We've talked about setting or reading all of the pins of the port at the same time, but they really are individual pins, and pins on one port may be connected to a variety of devices. If we only use the port level registers, changing an individual pin this way involves reading the register, modifying the value that we get back, and writing the result back out. In our example, it reads tris A, flips one bit, and writes it back out to tris A. That read, modify, write sequence has a race condition.
By race condition, you mean that after we've read the value, someone or something else could change one of the bits, and then when we write out our result, we lose that other change.
Exactly. That's clearly not good. The xc.h file also gives us bits definition for each of the port level registers that let us change one bit at a time. While this may look simpler, these still have the race condition. They've hidden the masking that we did when we modified tris A, but it still happens, so they still have that race condition. So these strategies work, but they have some risk. So we need to think about, when are we worried about that risk? Well, first, we aren't worried when we're reading, because the read, modify, write thing doesn't happen. Similarly, we aren't worried if we want to set the values for the whole register, which we often do during initialization. Again, no read, modify, write thing happening there. If we aren't dealing with interrupts, so we don't have to worry about our code being interrupted, then probably tris, lat, ODC, and ANSL registers aren't going to be written by anything else, so we probably don't have to worry about them. For the port register, writing to an input pin can affect the port register, even though it doesn't change the value of the pin. That'd be bad.
That's a lot to think about. Can we do it some other way that doesn't have this risk?
Yep. For every register that we've talked about, there are registers that do atomic operations for clearing bits, setting bits, or inverting bits. For these, you use an assignment statement to set the register with a mask for the bits you want to be affected. So if we set tris B clear to hex 11, only those two bits will be cleared. If we set lat C set to 21, those two bits on the lat register for port C will be set. And if we set lat C inv to hex 20, it will flip the 6th bit of lat_C.
Hey, that's the same thing our XOR example on the previous slide did. No race condition here?
Correct. No race conditions.
Sweet. So give us a real example that uses these.
Good idea. Let's suppose that there's an LED on port A, bit number 2, and nothing else on port A. There are 2 ways that we could set that pin up to be an output pin. We could set tris_A bits.tris_A2 to 0, since 0 means output. Or we could use tris_A clear with a mask for that 1 bit to clear it. Note that the bit starts at 0, so the mask of hex 4 masks bit number 2. An LED doesn't require high voltage, so we want open drain to be false. That's what it defaults to, so we don't have to do anything there. It also defaults to being an analog output, and that's okay. We'll drive with VDD, and that's enough to make the LED bright enough. From there, if we aren't worried about race conditions, we could use lat_A bits to turn it on or off. Or, more safely, we could use lat_A set to turn it on, lat_A clear to turn it off, or lat_A INV to flip its state. For an example of input, suppose we have a simple toggle switch on port B, bit 11. We want it to be an input device that is digital. Then we can read port B bits to see its current state. To use this, you need to look at the pin to see if the state of the switch has changed. Usually, that's done periodically, and we call that polling. That's good enough for now. So, at this point, you can control output pins and read from input pins. The next thing we'll talk about is configuring input pins so that we get and handle an interrupt when the state of the pin changes, so that we don't have to poll looking for a change.